Vectors can be expressed in terms of their horizontal and vertical components, which is x and y axis respectively, and another way to add vectors is to express naman both of them in terms of their horizontal and vertical components, then add them together. To find the resultant using the components, gagamitan natin ng Pythagorean theorem. From the previous lecture video, we studied the components of a vector. And one important reason for determining the components of a vector is that they are very useful in adding and subtracting vectors. In this lecture video, we begin by defining the vector addition in two methods. First, by graphical, and second, by components. And then, papakita natin how the same addition can be performed more concisely and more accurately with components. So, there's a huge difference sa graphical and sa components. Let's start with the vector addition by graphical. In general, vectors are added graphically or by graphical according to the following rule, and this is the rule. To add the vectors A and B, place the tail of B at the head of A, and the sum, yung C, vector C is equal to vector A plus vector B, is the vector extending from the tail of vector A to the head of B. So, para mas ma-visualize natin, say we have four vectors here. This is the vector A, vector B, vector C, and lastly, the vector D. So, sa graphical method, or tinatawag din natin siya na head-to-tail method, kuhanin muna natin yung vector A. Well, ilagay natin dito. And the next yung vector B, idudugtong natin dun sa head ng vector A yung tail ng vector B. And then, ganun din yung vector C. Same with vector D. And then, para malaman natin yung sum ng vector, i-connect natin ito hanggang dito. So, this is the vector sum. In order to place a given pair of vectors head to tail, it may be necessary to move the corresponding arrows, and this is fine as long as hindi natin babaguhin yung kanilang length and direction. Kagaya ng ginawa natin dito, 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 and dito. Hindi natin binago yung length niya at hindi rin natin binago yung direction. Pinag-connect lang natin lahat yung kanilang head and tails. After all, a vector is defined by its length and direction. So, if these are unchanged, hindi rin magbabago yung vector. Vector is defined by its magnitude and direction regardless of its location. In this figure, makikita natin yung dalawang vector na pinag-add, vector A and vector B, and this is the vector sum. Take note that yung sum ng vectors is independent of the order of which the vectors are added. For example, uunahin natin, dito kasi inuna yung vector A and then vector B, and pinag-connect. Kung unahin natin yung vector B from the origin and isusunod natin yung vector A, hindi magbabago yung vector sum nila. Now, suppose that yung vector A natin has a magnitude of 5 meters and yung vector B naman natin has a magnitude of 4.00 meters. And yung vector A natin has an angle of 60 degrees, while yung vector B naman is 20 degrees. These two vectors and their sum, yung vector C nga, ito siya. Paano natin malalaman yung length and direction angle of the vector C, yung vector sum nilang dalawa? And by graphical method, a graphical way to answer that question is to simply measure the length and direction of the vector C. Susukatin lang natin ito. We can use a ruler, and using a ruler, we can find the length of vector C to be approximately, say, 8.75 meters, approximately, again, kasi gumamit lang tayo dito ng pangsukat ng ruler. Similarly naman, kapag hinahanap na natin yung angle ng vector C, yung vector sum, gagamit na tayo ng protractor. So, we measure the angle theta to be, for example, 45 degrees using a protractor. And this is how we use graphical method to solve for the sum of vectors. Next, we add vectors by components. So, yung graphical method of adding vectors yields approximate results only, limited by the accuracy. Hindi ganun ka-accurate kapag ang gagamitin natin is the graphical method kasi susukatin lang natin siya manually, with which the vectors can be drawn and measured. In contrast, exact results naman na makukuha natin by adding say vector A and vector B in terms of their components. Vectors can be expressed in terms of their horizontal and vertical components, which is x and y axis respectively, and another way to add vectors is to express naman both of them in terms of their horizontal and vertical components, then add them together. To find the resultant using the components, gagamitan natin ng Pythagorean theorem. So going back to this figure, okay, sinosolve natin yung vector sum. Paano natin masosolve yung vector sum using components? Say, ang value again ng vector A is 5 meters. Ang vector B natin is 4 meters. Vector A has an angle of 60 degrees. And yung vector B naman natin has an angle of 20 degrees. Para malaman natin yung vector sum, kailangan muna nating hanapin yung y and x component ng vector sum na yan, or yung cx and cy, and ito yung gagamitin natin. Using these key points, of course, kailangan muna din nating malaman yung vertical and horizontal component nung i-add natin na vectors, which is vector A and vector B. For vector A, solve natin yung vertical and horizontal components. Let's start with AY. So we have 5 meters, sine 60 degrees, and ang AY natin is equal to 4.33 meters. For the horizontal component naman, 5 meters cosine 60 degrees, this is equal to 2.5 meters. For vector B, horizontal component, we have a magnitude of 4 meters, sine 20 degrees, and this is equal to 1.37 meters. For the horizontal component of vector B, 4 meters cosine 20 degrees, and this is equal to 3.76 meters. Alam na natin yung vertical and horizontal components nung dalawang vector na ina-add natin. Now, isasolve na natin yung horizontal and vertical components naman nung vector C natin, which is the vector sum. For CY, add natin yung AY and BY. We have 4.33 meters plus 1.37 meters. And ang value ng CY natin is equal to 5.7 meters. For the horizontal component of the vector sum, CX, we have 2.5 meters plus 3.76 meters. And the value of CX is equal to 6.26 meters. Pwede na natin malaman ngayon yung final answer for the vector sum by Pythagorean theorem. C is equal to CY square plus CX square. Substituting the values, square root of CY natin is 5.7 meters quantity square plus 6.26 meters quantity square. And by calculating, ang value ng C natin is equal to 8.47 meters. For the angle naman, gagamitin lang din natin itong CY and CX. Again, tangent function ang gagamitin natin. Inverse tangent of 5.7 meters over 6.26 meters. And ang angle theta natin, or the direction of the vector sum, is equal to 42.3 degrees. Etong method natin using components is more accurate than graphical method. So in the future lessons natin, we will always add vectors using components. So graphical method kasi is useful primarily as a rough checking lang on the results obtained with the components. Example number 1, what are the magnitude D and direction angle theta of the net displacement of the treasure hunt na makikita natin in this figure? As we can see, in this problem, hindi lang dalawang vector ang ipag-add natin but 3. We have vector A plus vector B plus vector C. Pero, take note na kahit gano'ng kadami yung vectors na pag-a-add natin is, same process pa rin ang gagawin natin. Kukunin natin yung horizontal and vertical components ng bawat vector na i-add natin, and then, i-collect natin lahat ng horizontal components nila pag-a-add natin, yun yung magiging horizontal component ng main vector sum na hinahanap natin. Same with the vertical component. Kunin muna natin lahat ng horizontal components ng tatlong vectors A, B, and C. For AX, we have 3.75 meters. Cosine, ang angle natin from the positive x-axis is 90. AX is equal to 0. 0, una-una, kahit hindi na natin siya i-solve kasi yung vector A natin is directly nakalatag siya sa positive y-axis. Wala siya sa x. For BX naman, we have 2.25 meters cosine 0. There, wala siyang angle. BX is equal to 2.25 meters lang din. For CX, this is equal to 3 meters cosine negative 45 degrees. Bakit negative? Kasi pag sinukat natin from the positive x-axis, ito siya, pababa, so that is a negative angle. CX is equal to 2.12 meters. For the vertical components naman, AY, we have directly 3.75 na siya agad kasi nasa positive y-axis. For BY naman, wala tayong BY kasi yung vector B natin na 2.25 meters, ang magnitude is nakalatag directly sa positive x-axis. So this is 0. For CX naman, we have 3 meters sine negative 45 degrees pa rin ang ilalagay natin. And the value is negative 2.12 meters. Nasolve na natin lahat ng vertical and horizontal components nung vectors natin na pag-a-add. I-add natin sila lahat ngayon and that will be the value of dx and dy, yung horizontal and vertical component ng vector sum natin. For dx, i-add natin lahat ito, 0 plus 2.25 meters plus 2.12 meters, dx is equal to 4.37 meters. For dy naman, we have 3.75 meters plus 0 plus negative 2.12 meters. And the value of dy is equal to 1.63 meters. Kaya mahalaga na natakal natin yung paglalagay ng sign of components. Finally, for the magnitude, d is equal to the square root of dy square plus dx square. So we have 1.63 meters quantity square plus 4.37 meters quantity square. The value of the magnitude of d now is equal to 4.66 meters. For the direction, angle theta is equal to inverse tangent of 1.63 meters over 4.37 meters. The value of the direction of the vector d is equal to 20.5 degrees. So kung hindi natin susundin nitong vector A, B, C, papunta dun sa main goal which is the treasure hunt, hindi tayo dadaan dito, hindi tayo dadaan dito, at hindi tayo dadaan dito, pwede na tayong dumiretso using the vector D, eto, with a distance of 4.66 meters, 20.5 degrees from the positive x-axis. And this is example number 1. How do we subtract vectors naman? Suppose for example, yung dalawang vectors natin kanina, vector A and vector B, isusubtract natin yung vector B sa vector A. Kanina sa example natin, we have vector A plus vector B, and the kanyang value is vector C. And in this example naman, isusubtract naman natin yung B. Say, this is now the vector D. As an example, Consider natin tong vectors A and B na to. And we start by rewriting the equation for it as follows. Ganito nga siya. That is, vector D, ito, is the sum of vector A and negative vector B. Parang pinag-add lang natin siya and ginawa natin negative yung vector B. Now, the negative of a vector naman has a very simple graphical interpretation. Ito siya. The negative of a vector is represented by an arrow of the same length as the original vector but pointing in the opposite direction. Kung gagamit tayo ng graphical method, i-reverse lang natin yung vector na yun. That is, multiplying a vector by -1 reverses its direction. Kapag ginawa natin negative, magpapalit ng direction pero same ng magnitude. So, ito yung ating figure kanina. We have positive vector A and positive vector B. But now, i-reverse natin yung vector B, gagawin natin negative, magbabago yung kanyang direction. Say, ayan, for the second figure. And by graphical method, head-to-tail method, makukuha natin yung vector D. So, ito yung positive vector natin kanina. Nung nireverse na natin siya, ito na siya, and ito na yung ating vector sum. So, that's how we subtract the vectors. And in terms of components naman, isusubtract natin yung mga vectors by simply subtracting the components. So, malalaman natin yung components ng vector D, dx and dy by ito, ax minus bx, negative na siya, and ay minus by. Once the components of the vector D are found, yung magnitude and direction angle can be calculated as usual. Example number 2, find the magnitude and direction of the vector D in this problem given yung same magnitude and direction ng vector B and vector A natin. Solve natin yung dx muna. This is ax minus bx. Nasolve na natin yung ax and bx kanina and ang value ng ax is equal to 2.5 meters minus yung bx is 3.76 meters. Ang value ng dx is equal to negative 1.26 meters. For dy, ay minus by, and this is 4.33 meters minus 1.37 meters. The value of dy now is equal to 2.96 meters. Solving for the magnitude of d, Pythagorean theorem ang gagawin natin, and yung dx natin is negative 1.26 meters quantity square plus 2.96 meters quantity square. Calculating, d is equal to 3.22 meters. And for the angle, same process ulit ang gagawin natin. Inverse tangent of 2.96 meters over negative 1.26 meters. Ang value ng theta is equal to negative 66.9 degrees. So, para malaman natin yung positive direction ng angle na to from the positive x-axis, i-add lang natin yung 180 degrees. So, this is 66.9 degrees plus 180 degrees, and ang makukuha natin is 113 degrees from the positive x direction counterclockwise. As we can notice, makikita natin that yung vector D is shorter than vector B. Again, sa subtraction of vectors, i-reverse lang natin yung direction ng isang vector na isusubtract natin from another vector, and same process na rin ang gagawin natin.